welcome to this panel discussion, which will address the strategic role that culture and the culture economy in particular and the creative industries can play in the reconstruction and recovery of cities affected by crisis or by disaster. My name is Lodovico Folin-Calabi. I'm the Chief of Task Force in the Cabinet of UNESCO's Director General for the flagship initiatives Revive the Spirit of Mosul and LiBeirut, which have been launched by UNESCO to coordinate the organization's response in the recovery and reconstruction of Mosul and Beirut. And I'm happy to be with you today to moderate this session and discuss the topic of the role of culture economy and the economy of culture in the building of inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable urban environments with our distinguished panelists that I'm very happy to introduce. Dr. Sameh Wahba, Global Director of the World Bank's Urban Disaster Risk Management, Resilience and Land Global Practice. A colleague, Professor Cullen, Special Advisor on Culture and in the Sustainable Cities, United Cities and Local Governments, UCLG. Dr. Hilmar Farid, Director General at the Ministry of Education and Culture of Indonesia. And Mr. Asaad Zoghaib, Mayor of Zahlé in Lebanon, a city which is also part of the UNESCO network of creative cities. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. I will start with my first question to our first panelist, our colleague Sameh Wahba from the World Bank. Dr. Wahba, the World Bank has positioned itself as a strategic actor and partner in the area of culture and emergency for a number of years now, not only in terms of operations at the country level, but also in terms of setting policies and policy guidance, including and especially in urban contexts. With UNESCO, you published, among others, a position paper back in 2018, a position paper on culture in city reconstruction and recovery, the so-called CURE approach, which offers a culture-based framework for city reconstruction and recovery that integrates both people-centered and place-based approaches. In your opinion, and according to your experience, what is the relevance of culture economy and the creative industries in particular in post-crisis recovery and reconstruction processes?
Thank you, Lodo, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. So in the joint position paper that we've published with UNESCO on culture in city reconstruction and recovery, the main premise is that culture is the glue that integrates between two sets of important approaches, place-based interventions and people-based interventions, both of which are critical in a post-disaster, post-conflict, or post-crisis response as far as the reconstruction and the resilient recovery are concerned. By people-based approaches, we mean, interventions that are focused on supporting people to realize choices, to improve their livelihoods, to restore their livelihoods that have been affected by such disaster or such conflict. These could be any types of programs, focused on cash grants, support to individual livelihoods, cash for works type program, etc. These programs clearly being critical because they're focusing on the reconstruction of livelihoods, they could not be disconnected from a sense of place, from an identity of place, and vice versa. In affected areas, whether again a city that has been devastated by an earthquake or by a flood or by a conflict, an investment in the place, so a place-based approach, to restore the cultural heritage, to rebuild the affected neighborhoods, etc., is also critical. However, it's not a choice of an either or. It's about integrating those two. And for us, culture is that glue that integrates these two different approaches and creates, if you will, that place-based approach that anchors, people-based interventions, and that sense of people and sense of community and identity that anchors place-based intervention. So that's on the one hand on how we believe the role of culture is central to that process of reconstruction and resilient recovery. On another hand, the cultural economy and the creative industries are critical sectors in terms of job creation within cities. At the end of the day, the city is an agglomeration with advantages as far as productivity, as far as creativity, knowledge spillovers, and at the end of the day, it is a labor market. And the central role that the cultural economy and the creative industries play in there is really critical. We're talking about an economy that's about 4.3 trillion US dollars, globally 6.1% of global GDP. We're talking about the segment of the labor market that creates the most jobs for youth, that creates more jobs for women than they create for men. So it has a very important empowering effect as far as from a gender perspective or from a youth perspective. So the importance of the cultural economy and the creative industries in spurring a revival is really critical. They're also critical because, again, many of these jobs are also in the form of self-employed. I mean, there's quite a bit of operations within the informal sector, and in a context of crisis, including the current pandemic, I mean, these are the most affected livelihoods. I mean, the 1.6 to 2 billion workers globally who work in the informal sector are the most affected because they live from hand to mouth. They have no steady jobs, no regular incomes, no safety nets, and therefore their ability to weather a crisis like this one is very hard. So again, another focus on the cultural economy and the creative industries becomes critical from reconstruction of livelihoods, including focus on the most affected. So when you add these up, it gives you a sense of the importance of the role that culture and the cultural economy and the creative industries could play in a process of revival post-crisis. Back to you, Lod.
Thank you very much, Sameh. Thank you very much indeed. And I would turn to Katrin. Katrin, Ms. Cullen, you are special advisor on culture in sustainable cities at the United Cities and Local Governments, which is the largest organization of local and regional governments in the world. You also have been you're also a former representative of local government yourself, having been the deputy mayor for culture of a large city of Lille in France. Building on this double experience, what policies, measures, and mechanisms are needed, in your opinion, to make the cultural economy the cornerstone for sustainable and people-centered cities, along what Sameh told us before?
Hello. Thank you for your presentation and for inviting me to speak. The first key element needed at the local government level is the political will to recognize culture as a driver and enabler of sustainable development, and to develop policies that put the cultural economy on par with other important dimensions of city life. Culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development is being implemented in many cities of the world, bringing visibility to its role in sustainable development, economic viability, social equity, environmental responsibility, and cultural vitality. The development of specific policies in each area of city life remains, of course, a necessity, but a transversal and integrated approach across all areas is essential today. Cities know that the creative industries play a strong role in contributing to their economic growth, and that arts and cultural industries create opportunities for skill development and training, which increase know-how and employability. Often, businesses in the creative industries are small or medium-sized and can be helped on their way by a diversity of mechanisms: creative residences, innovation hubs, or incubators. And many cities are already involved in developing sustainable tourism that creates new jobs and promotes local culture and products. In working towards sustainability and people-centered cities, it is important to engage in actions that are achievable, measurable, and inclusive. For example, contributions to the local economy by the public, civic, and private cultural sectors and their direct or indirect impact on the creation of wealth and employment should be analyzed regularly and monitored, something cities often forget to do. Other important measures are the establishment of a variety of financing mechanisms for-profit cultural projects, such as microcredits, venture capital, and sponsorship programs, or fostering partnerships between people active in the cultural sector and businesses, for example, through creative residencies or other systems supporting innovation and knowledge transfer. In the cultural sphere, as in all areas of production, it is necessary to recognize artists and cultural professionals, ensure access to their works, protect their creative property rights, promote corporate responsibility, and provide an adequate range of support mechanisms for pluridisciplinary cultural projects, of which there are more and more. Governance of culture is important to city policy. Local governments are applying multi-actor governance frameworks, governing in dialogue with cultural sector, with civil society, with private sector, academia, etc. Today, many cities in the world are including culture and the cultural economy in matters of education, urban planning, economic development, health, environmental issues, social services, mobility, etc. It takes time and is not without its hurdles and difficulties, but it is vital if we want to move towards sustainable people-centered cities. Effective links between public, market, and cooperative cultural economies and forms of reciprocity between them are essential to achieving people-centered, ecologically balanced economic development. And there is no doubt that cities can and do play an essential role in making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrin. Thank you very much also because of your take as both policy advisor yourself and with your experience as one of the local governors yourself. That is was very much important. Thank you very much. I will now turn to Dr. Hilmar Farid, Director General at the Ministry of Education and Culture of Indonesia. Dr. Farid, you are the Director General in the ministry, a large and very important ministry in Indonesia, with Indonesia being one of the strongest advocates of the importance of culture economy and creative industries for the sustainable development of communities and societies, including in an urban context. In a way, you are yourself an advocate of those policies that Sameh and Katrin spoke about, implemented directly by the government. Could you share with us the reasons, your experience of such strong commitment and share with us any good experiences which, in your opinion, could be replicated from the case of Indonesia, could be replicated elsewhere?
Right. Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak at this panel. Speaking about the source of commitment, I think it's firmly rooted in the cultural makeup of Indonesia. Our country is known for its mega diversity, both in terms of biodiversity and cultural diversity. It's a nation composed of no less than 1,000 ethnic and sub-ethnic groups, speaking more than 600 languages. So awareness of cultural difference, cultural diversity has been a key element in the society because it's a very element that holds us together as a nation, as a community. And that is why cultural protection and preservation, respect for tradition, heritage, and so on is clearly stated in the Constitution. But of course, cultural economy is a different story. For decades, our economy has been based on natural resources, oil and gas back in the 1970s and 80s, and mining, particularly coal mining, and also palm oil plantations in the last 20 years. But after the oil boom in the 1980s, we realized that natural resources are limited and always come with a price, environmental, social, and so on. So we had to look for alternatives. And it's only natural that we turn to our cultural resources, both tangible and intangible. And that is when the rapid development of the cultural economy and creative industries actually started. And today it has become a multi-million industry. As for best practices, I think the key word here is focus. Having so many cultural resources is a blessing and a curse at the same time. Now, you have to make decisions about what you want to do because you cannot do everything. And it's very important to include civil society groups, the practitioners, artists in the decision-making process. And it should be a bottom-up process. So we pick one or two elements, concentrate your energy and resources on that, and most importantly, let the community of artists, practitioners, and on take the lead. The government should play a facilitating role more than anything else. I can give you several examples, but let me focus on the story of dangdut. Dangdut is a genre of folk music, very popular in both urban and rural areas, partly rooted in local musical traditions, but also fused from Hindustani and Arabic music. It started back in the 1970s and reached its peak in the late 1990s. But what is very important from the story is that the fact that it had become an important branch of the creative industry with recordings, live shows, movies, etc., and that it gave rise to other genres at the local levels. So it is this propelling quality of cultural resources that is really important to consider in discussions about cultural economy and creative industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid. This focusing on the propelling role, as you say, of culture is indeed a take from your experience in Indonesia. And I also very much appreciate your reference to the inclusion of civil society and practitioners in the among the policy decision makers. I would like now to turn to the fourth panelist, Mr. Asaad Zoghaib, the mayor of Zahlé in Lebanon. As I said, Zahlé is also a city which is part of the UNESCO network of creative cities since 2013. You are the mayor of Zahlé, and you are aimed at promoting a cooperation with and among cities that have identified creativity as a strategic factor for sustainable urban development, which is the essence of the Creative Cities Network in itself. What insights resulting from Zahlé experience as a UNESCO creative city, particularly under the typology of gastronomy, can you share with us, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. And, you know, Zahlé is a cultural city before it became a city of gastronomy. Cultural city because most of the poets of Lebanon are from Zahlé, and most of the writers are from Zahlé. And Zahlé is known as the city of poetry and wine. They have mixed between poetry, because a lot of poets are here from here, and wine because we are, this is the place where most of the Lebanese food that you eat in Lebanon, all over Lebanon, and maybe all over the world, it all started in Zahlé from 1886. This is a long time ago, on the banks of a small river in the middle of the town called Berdowna River. And this Berdowna River, it's a place, it's like a paradise, full of greenery, of, water. Anybody from the Arab country would like to come to this place, especially if he's an educated person or if he is a poet. So we had a lot of poets from all the Arab countries that used to come to this area and say their poems. And here in Zahlé, more than 50 poets that I've known, they used to come every summer. So, but because of gastronomy, because of the Lebanese meza that we started it, the city became known for its gastronomy. And before 1975, if anybody in Lebanon wants to eat the Lebanese meza or the Lebanese food, there were no restaurants all over Lebanon except in Zahlé. They have to come to Zahlé. But because of the war that started in 1975, they had to open in different places, and now it is food that is being offered all over the world. For us, we link gastronomy and culture. Culture as far as poets. At the entrance of the city, we have a statue for Venus, the goddess of wine. And also we have a book, very big book, showing that you are coming to a city of poetry and wine. This city is the city of poetry and wine. The mixture is very beautiful, and maybe when you are sitting on a table drinking and trying to talk to people who are of a certain level of culture, then you have the possibility of creating some poems and discuss with the population of the city. That was started from 1920, 1930, 1940s. So we are a city of culture, but we have been selected by the UNESCO to be a city of gastronomy because this is the most important thing, because this is the tradition of the city of. We think, very important for us to work together. And I've said something before, it's a slogan that I've said, it's solidarity is creativity. To work together is very important. And when Beirut, they had this blast over there and so many people wanted to work in Beirut, we had a role, but we had so many civil societies that we had to know how to put them together. No one of them, no NGO that is existing in Zahlé that is rich enough to go and do the work. The important thing is to put them together, and all of them together work in one direction to do one street. And this is what was the role of the city of Zahlé as the municipality, to put all these civil societies together, distribute the work between them, and go do one job, all of us working in one direction, and all the money that we were trying to collect was put with all these more than 10 NGOs working together to do the work which we never used to do, rebuilding a certain street in Beirut. So this is where we together work together. City of Gastronomy helped a city of culture in Beirut. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And also thank you, of course, for your reference to the terrible blast that hit Beirut on the 4th of August last year. I think we will get back to this in a moment. And I would like to turn now to my second round of questions. And my second question for Sameh and the World Bank. Dr. Wahba, Sameh, the UNESCO strategy on culture in emergency, which was adopted in 2015, states that the engagement with relevant stakeholders working also outside of the strict realm of culture domain is the key to effectively mainstream culture into the recovery processes, and notably in the city context. The World Bank is undoubtedly one of those key stakeholders. What is your perspective on this long-term objective, that of positioning culture at the heart of people, spaces, and in the heart of the city recovery policies, notably in the context of the ongoing planetary crisis, which is indeed exacerbating the living conditions of communities in everywhere, and particularly in urban centers affected by crisis. You somehow referred to the impact of COVID in your first answer to the question, but I'd like to hear on this. Thank you, Sameh.
Thank you, Lodo. So cities have been in the front line of this COVID-19 crisis. I mean, it is an urban crisis. It emerged in an urban area. It spread in urban areas on account of, the concentration of people. Again, a lot has been said about how density might have been the culprit, which I don't think is the case, because you had lots of large cities and dense cities that have fared, much better than many other smaller or less dense areas. You just only need to think about places like Seoul and Singapore and how they've managed to, keep under control the viral spread and manage the situation. So again, a signal that it was not per se about density, but about when density is not managed well and it becomes really more about crowding. Now, in a context of a sanitary crisis of this magnitude, and when I say this magnitude, I'm talking about the economic lockdowns that have taken place as part of national and local government policies to try to contain the virus spread, the impact on many people, the health impact on those who were infected, but also the economic impact, and especially on poor and vulnerable households, especially informal sector workers who could not afford to stay at home, without livelihoods, and therefore had to go and look for work. In fact, since we have Dr. Hilmar with us here, we did a study on Jakarta on mobility, and we discovered that the mobility of the poorest 20% of the population dropped much less than the mobility of the richest segments of the population. In other words, the rich can afford to stay at home, work from home, study from home, whereas the poor cannot, and therefore expose themselves to more situations of vulnerability. And lastly, as far as city impacts are concerned, they are meant to continue delivering on services, often at higher costs, but at the same time, the revenues are dropping significantly. So we've done studies on cities around the world, and the average drop in municipal finances is anywhere between 15 to 40% of their estimated annual revenues. So when you add these factors combined, it is a very severe crisis that has hit cities very hard. And therefore, the recovery process will need to involve all stakeholders coming and working together. It needs to involve central and local government working well together, because central government is going to be at the source of the most important stimulus packages that are out there. There's money that will come from concessional financing sources, but at the end of the day, the main driver of economic recovery is the stimulus packages that central governments will be putting in place. So that vertical coordination, central and national government, is critical. Coordination with the private sector and civil society is critical in terms of identifying, on the basis of consensus, the priorities for the recovery and the reconstruction, in terms of the focus on the affected people, but also identifying key elements of that recovery. We've seen lots of cities trying to undertake investments that totally transform the city towards the future. We've heard, cities like Paris and Milan and many others talking about the 15-minute city, which is, if you will, the more advanced formulation of, attempts at trying to increase active mobility, cycling, walking, expanding sidewalks, doing bicycle lanes, reclaiming back parts of the city from the automobile, and trying to create more livable and more inclusive places. So as cities are trying to do that transformation towards livability and inclusion, by reclaiming back the city, by rethinking proximity, by looking at more compact and livable cities, I think you're getting here the ingredients of what that city of the future is going to look like. And that city of the future will have two key foundations to it. The first, it will be an inclusive city, because the most affected areas were the slums and the informal settlements around the world. They were the places where people had poor housing conditions, no security of tenure, no infrastructure, no public spaces, and therefore they became COVID-19 hotspots, if you want. So a lack of investment into tackling this inequality in cities, into improving living conditions where the poorest are living, will undermine the city of the future. So you need a foundation of an inclusive city. And these are also the residents of the city who are they're essential workers. They're the nurses, they are, the garbage collection professionals, they are the police, they are the various jobs that will need to be carried out in person, underpin the city, and are the essential workers of the city to the extent that the city caters for this population in terms of affordable housing, etc. The city will be inclusive. The second dimension of the city will be the livability. Now, a trend of work from home has accelerated on account of the crisis. There'll be much more investment in digital infrastructure, enabling much more jobs that could not necessarily need to be carried from the workplace to be carried from home or elsewhere. So the city of tomorrow is no longer going to be just the labor market. It will be a city about livability, about amenities, about the quality of food, like in Zahlé, about the quality of the restaurants, about the quality of the museums, about the public spaces, about the quality of education that you get in the universities and in the schools. These will be the magnets that will attract people to live in cities. And it will be about livability and inclusion. And underpinning those two is culture. So, but this is not something that a culture official or a minister of culture or a secretary of culture will be able to do. If you don't have with you the minister of finance, if you don't have with you civil society, if you don't have with you the private sector, if you're not talking to central government, to ensure that you are part and center of the stimulus package, you're not going to get anywhere. So the mayor and the culture officials will need to be working across all segments of society. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sameh. And I think what you said about the inclusiveness and the need not to make sure that the digital infrastructure is there not to increase further the divide and inequality, but rather to help in the inclusiveness is a key factor. I think we can count on the World Bank in advocating with the ministers of economy and finance around the world in helping their colleagues, ministers of culture, in that. Thank you very much, Sameh. My question now, my second question for Katrin is, in your view, what should local governments do to harness the potential of creative cities and artistic expressions to contribute to peace and stability and to provide support to people affected by crisis in particular?
Well, the first step is to recognize their potential as agents of transformation and development. The diversity of cultural expressions goes hand in hand with the diversity of urban populations. And indeed, global debates in the 21st century have recognized the importance of cultural diversity as an essential component of innovation, citizenship, and potential for peaceful societies. Cultures forge dynamic and interactive relationships between people and their environments, and where individuals and communities can enjoy cultural freedoms, which require spaces and processes for citizen participation and decision-making, this both leads to and is an essential condition for peace and democracy. Lifelong access to and participation in cultural and symbolic worlds are essential factors for the development of capacities, expression, choice, and critical thinking, which allow for the construction of citizenship and peace in our societies. These values are based on the real practical experience of cities and local governments, and they summarize the commitment of local governments to integrate culture into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, both locally and globally. Interaction is really important. So local governments can harness the potential of creative industries and artistic expressions by recognizing their value to the city's development, by proposing spaces for work, expression, showcasing, providing public spaces and financial support. At the same time, inclusive cultural policies, access to cultural services, and active participation in cultural processes are essential to enable people who are marginalized, impoverished, or in otherwise disadvantaged situations to overcome their difficulties and actively participate in their own inclusion in society. And it has been shown that by not doing this, one loses a huge human potential of untapped talents and opportunities for self-empowerment. The COVID-19 crisis has had an impact on all dimensions of our lives: public health, labor systems, social interaction, political debate, the use of public spaces, the economy, the environment, and cultural life. A large number of cities are using digital platforms to share information and cultural content while helping to ease the isolation and the feeling of unease of their citizens. Some cities and local governments are encouraging a change in the current urban model through the lens of culture and innovation. There is a huge opportunity for new programs that foster cultural, people-centered projects, enabling access to culture and incentive to practice, co-create, participate, co-direct, and co-curate, for example. This has involved a wide range of unprecedented emergency measures to ensure the survival of the cultural sector during the crisis and beyond, which shows how important the continuation of an active cultural life is to the economic and social well-being of cities. Many cities across the world have been proactively supporting the cultural sector through training and capacity building, changes in cultural programming to online, tax, rent, and fee exemptions or reductions, and a whole array of measures and subsidies for the cultural sector. In this crisis, people have turned to culture to create meaning, to show solidarity, and to boost general morale. There cannot be a better illustration of why culture needs to be consolidated as the fourth pillar of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katrin. And interesting the fact that you referred to the diversity of cultural expressions that need to go hand in hand with the diversity of the urban environment. This was also what Dr. Hilmar said when he was sharing the experience of his country. And then there is this return from all of you on the importance for innovation as one of the threads of the response to the crisis, particularly in these times of pandemic. I'd like to ask Dr. Hilmar, my second question for you. We all recall the terrible series of earthquakes that your country had to face in recent years. Your approach went beyond, the Indonesian approach went beyond considering culture mere liability and actually used culture economy and the creative industries as a leverage for and in the recovery processes, strengthening the resilience of Indonesian people and helping them to regain a sense of identity and sense of normalcy. In a way, is what you were saying before when it came to a choice to be made in Indonesia versus the certain natural resources. What do you consider as the key outcomes from this approach, and what challenges did you have to face?
Right. Thank you. So before working for the government, I was involved in several humanitarian projects here in Indonesia. And one important lesson that I learned in dealing with recovery from disasters is that resilience resides with the community. It's an innate quality embedded in the social fabric of the society. I can give you an example from our daily life here in Indonesia. Whenever a member of the community passes away, regardless of age, gender, class, religion, and so on, then spontaneously other members of the community would offer help. No formal organization is needed, no command structure or whatever, and in most cases, no money involved. So this is the particular energy, what I think explains cultural resilience. No? And it's not something that you can design or plan, but it's just there. So what I think is necessary is to tap this particular energy, this cultural resource in dealing with problems around you, including disasters. No? The key issue here is, of course, participation. And this is not easy because government agencies are not designed for participatory methods most of the time, no? But I think we all have experience in dealing with issues of community participation and engagement. So what I think is equally important is data. In 2018, we organized a large documentation process, collecting information from literally thousands of communities, which is now the basis of our policy making. It really helps you to develop evidence-based policies with support of the community. And knowledge of the resources and strong connection with the community is really essential here. And the biggest challenge for us now is, of course, the geographical spread with more than 500 districts. And the key issue here is also the ability to work closely together with local governments and other stakeholders at the local level. It is impossible for us at the ministry, at the central government, to design programs by ourselves. So inclusion of civil society is again very essential, and try to balance the different and sometimes competing interests of the different stakeholders. And what I see the role of the government here is to play the role more of a facilitator. Yeah, and at the ministry here we have a slogan, Tut Wuri Handayani. It's an old Javanese saying, which basically means to guide and lead from behind. And I think the slogan summarizes and captures our approach quite well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilmar. I'd like now to turn to the mayor again of Mayor of Zahlé. Mr. Mayor, your city, Zahlé, has contributed to the international efforts in support of Beirut after the blast of August last year. You mentioned before, you touched upon the project Beirut Bi Al Zahlé, Beirut in the heart of Zahlé, focusing on adopting a street in the affected areas. Please tell us what was the role of creativity in this city-to-city support.
First of all, we felt that we are responsible, like everybody or like every other NGO worldwide that were coming and helping over there. We are just a nearby city that we could help from our own resources, which are not much. But in order to do a job and do it properly, we have to work together. And the money that we may collect for this work that we have to do in a certain street in Beirut, it has to go to that street and not distributed in such a way that every NGO goes and work just a small part at the end. You look at that, you never find that the work is being done in a complete way, except that if they work together, if we put all our money in one place, then we see a work done. We can see a work is finished by this group of people. We had more than 10 NGOs working together. They never worked together. When I heard that they are ready to help, and me as a municipality, we were ready to help. But we are ready to help through our people of Zahlé. So I called for a meeting, and I told them that if we work together, and the municipality is going to help financially also, and we are going to get some help from people of Zahlé living worldwide. We have a lot of people from Zahlé living all over the world, and they have their own clubs. The Club of Zahlé, we have in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Boston, New York, Los Angeles, Brazil, France, from all over, Sydney, from all over the world, they were ready to help. So there were bits and pieces coming. We collect them all. We start having what you call a weekly meeting for these NGOs to put them together. The meetings were very successful because that was the reason behind them working together and do a job. And really, we have finished a street that we were supposed to finish. Unfortunately, we finished what we talked about, what we told them that we will finish, we finished, but the exterior needs also some finishing, that we still lack some financial support to do to complete the building. But as said, it's working together. Me as a creative city, Zahlé as a creative city. Creativity is not only in gastronomy, creativity is not only in culture, creativity is knowing how to work together. This we lack in Lebanon, maybe in some other places in the world, they know how to work in a teamwork. In Lebanon, we are very much individuals. So what we did is we made them work together. Nobody got the credit. All of us got the credit. Zahlé got the credit to do this job. When we finished the job, we visited all the families. We offered them some Lebanese, some food from what we do traditionally in Zahlé. It was like a gift for all the families, and we visited all of them. It was something to show solidarity with Beirut and work with Beirut. And we never talked about it. We never advertised about it that much. All what I cared for is that we in Zahlé know that we now know how to work together. It's very important that we should know how to work together more than advertising about this to the others. It's advertising to us. This is the most important thing. And thanks God, we succeeded in this job. We succeeded, and we are ready to work all the time together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The importance of the diaspora, in this case of Zahlé, of the Zahlé community around the world, and this creativity, which means also learning how to work together, is a very important reference that you made. Thank you. I would now return to the question and answers from our audience. And we have a few questions. We have one question for each panelist. We have a question for Sameh. The question is from the audience: how can we help assess the contribution of the cultural economy and creative industry to the broader economy? Are there more nuanced metrics aside from quantitative measures? This is the question for you, Sameh.
It's a very good question. Obviously, the quantitative is the one that is most spoken about, either in terms of the contribution, in terms of the number of jobs created in the various creativity sectors, whether it's gastronomy, design, art, etc., or the contribution to GDP. So again, these are two quantitative metrics. But for instance, in my earlier introduction, we spoke about, for instance, the impact in terms of job creation, both from a gender and youth perspective. That for youth aged 15 to 29, this is the most important job creating segment that is available to them. And again, for women, more than half of the jobs in the cultural economy and the creative industries go to women. So it has definitely an inclusive impact on society. In particular, getting women into the labor force is a job that's very important, especially in some regions of the world where the disparities are glaring, but also as far as youth are concerned, which in many other countries, where there is crime and violence, the ability to, integrate youth and, take them, if you will, off the streets of gang violence, of the issues that face youth in some parts of the world is another very important topic. Now, far less tangible but equally important is the role that culture plays also in reconciliation. You've got, again, as part of this CURE framework paper, we've done an in-depth case study on the city of Medellin, which is, a city that has neither been affected by a disaster in the sense of an earthquake nor by, if you will, an outright conflict, but rather by protracted, urban distress over time, again, associated with issues related to the drug trade, to urban crime and violence, and the degradation of the built environment. And again, the extent to which culture was the foundation on which this reconstruction and recovery occurred in terms of the integration of poorer neighborhoods from a mobility perspective with the city, investing in them with cultural amenities like libraries, like open spaces, art, culture, to try basically to create a foundation for the urban regeneration of these neighborhoods that puts them at par with the rest of the city. So when you take these elements together and you look at how this served as a foundation for a recovery of a city that was one time, 20, 30 years ago, a no-go place, to today, getting prizes like the most innovative city in the world, one of the most livable cities, etc., to being that turnaround story, that is one of those intangible dimensions of culture that is harder to quantify, but is obvious to those of us who have accompanied that experience. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sameh. So we have other 3 questions and 10 minutes before the end of the session. The question is for Katrin. How can we create a new and concrete value proposition which positions culture on government agendas as an essential tool in post-crisis reconstruction and recovery processes? I don't know if that was clear, or you wish me to repeat? So
how can we create the end part, just the end part?
How can we, yeah, let me repeat it. How can we create a new value proposition which positions culture on government agendas as an essential tool in post-crisis reconstruction processes?
Well, I'm afraid my answer is going to be by fighting for it. I think that all the struggles to bring culture, first of all, to world visibility through the UN mechanisms and in local activities has been a fight. But more concretely, I think that by showing a bit what I was saying before, how culture is really involved in a big way, in a strong way, in so many aspects of municipal life, let's say. I'm just taking municipal, but it could be expanded. That gives it a credit. Of course, many municipalities acknowledge today that economy plays a real role. Cultural economy plays a role in economic development of cities. Tourism, it plays a role in social inclusion. So some things have got there, some things are required, but there is still a lot of work to do. And I mean, for example, something that has come up recently but has been studied for a few years is the role of culture in public health, in mental health. Now we're talking about it a lot. So little by little, I think that cultural actors and cultural people responsible for culture should open up and show how culture affects our daily lives, basically.
Thank you, Katrin. Let me turn to the question for Dr. Farid. Dr. Farid, we have, I'm sorry, I just missed the questions while I was reading it. So yes, sorry, Dr. Farid, we have heard a lot of the past days about the role of multilateralism in the promotion of the culture and creative industries. What are your views on this? What should be or could be better done at the national level, and what at the multilateral level?
Well, yeah, thank you. Very important question. So our approach here, talking, for example, in our region, in ASEAN, yeah, is to cooperate on different levels. So, for example, tangible heritage, we know that here in Indonesia, for example, we have the Great Borobudur, which is a world heritage, and it's connected actually with different sites here throughout Asia. So in dealing with issues that have like common problems, like say climate change and the challenge that it posed for the preservation of cultural heritage, then it should be like a multilateral attempt. But in terms of trying to use your cultural resources in developing like cultural economy, creative industries, it should be unique. because that's what actually has a value, the uniqueness of things. So I think in general, to answer your question, is when it comes to preservation, especially when dealing with global issues, including conflict, war, and so on, it should be an international attempt. But in trying to make use of your cultural resources for your economic development, social development, and it can be based on a national context. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilmar. Last question is for the mayor of Zahlé, Mr. Zoghaib. Mr. Mayor, we've heard, I'm reading the questions, we've heard Dr. Farid refer to the importance to include civil society groups in decision-making processes. Do you agree? And what has been done in this regard in Zahlé? You referred somehow to this in your last interventions, the importance of involving civil societies. The question is, what has been done in this regard in Zahlé?
Well, I am a mayor since 1998, and ever since I became a mayor, I never did any work in any place or any quartier in Zahlé, except that the people where I'm going to go work, they should know ahead of time about it, and they should discuss and they should approve of it. This was very important for me. This was an attitude at the beginning the people did not understand. Like in 1998, it shows that the mayor is weak. He's asking permission or something like that. With time, they got used to dialogue. We together now, we discuss which is more important, why we should do this, why we should do that. And because I know that NGOs are very important in our society, and we have been having NGOs since 1945 in different sectors, and now we have a lot of NGOs. I myself created more than 6 NGOs in the objective of working together, working to the benefit of the city, putting priorities, discussing priorities together. For us, it's very important.
What do you think it is?
It is a tree, some kind of thing next to the camera. He moved it. Now it's become like he's looked as an angel.
Sorry, we hear. Sorry, Mr. May, we heard some off voices. If
you told him,
yeah? Before the session, yes.
Please go ahead, Mr. Mayor. Just bearing in mind we have only 3 minutes before the end of the session, and then we'll be having automatically disconnected.
I just want to add that everything that we do at the municipality, we do it with the collaboration of the population of the city. This is very good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you very much to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, we have now reached the end of this very enriching session. We've heard the perspectives of international organizations, national and local authorities, cultural practitioners about the strategic role that culture and culture economy and creative industries can play for urban recovery and resilience. There was a lot of, I think that there are a lot of takes from this session. The importance of political will to put culture and to give its role as a 4th pillar in development. The informal sector with no safety nets that is the most affected by the pandemic. The awareness of the cultural diversity of a country as a key asset in placing culture at the heart of the policies, and these as a choice that the governments have. Solidarity as a sign of creativity, as the mayor reminded us. And this important studies that the World Bank led on the average drop of city revenues during the pandemic that might even more affect the economic situation. But I think that all underlined the important role that culture has as a 4th pillar in the not only in the recovery but also in the economic recovery, particularly in this moment of pandemic. If you're interested in hearing more about this subject, case studies on mainstreaming culture and city reconstruction and recovery, led by Mr. Ahmed Aweda and the World Bank, will take place later today from 5 to 5:30 Abu Dhabi time. And before concluding, I'd like really to thank you all for your participation, to all the panelists, and naturally for our host, the Abu Dhabi Culture Summit, and the Abu Dhabi Department of Tourism and Culture in Abu Dhabi for the organization of this summit. I'd like to thank you all. And I had a video to show, but unfortunately we have no time for that. So we'll hopefully have the chance to review it online. Thank you, Gail, to all of you and for our audience for their questions. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.